Good morning, everyone. We will get started in a couple of minutes. We want to make sure we we have a large number of participants today coming to the grant webinar. So we're going to give everybody a couple more minutes to arrive, and then we will get started. This is being recorded. It is also being live streamed so that everybody who wants to attend can attend. All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming in on a Friday morning. We're happy to present information about this very exciting opportunity we have for schools and school staff. The Grow Your Own grant opportunities for school staff. This is happily presented by the Michigan Department of Education and the Office of Educator Excellence. Your presenters today, Holly. I will let Holly introduce herself really quickly here.
Hi, everyone. I'm Holly Carruthers. I work in the Recruitment and Retention Recognition Unit within the Office of Educator Excellence. And my work is to support educator recruitment and to build and support 6th through 12th grade programs.
And then good morning. My name is Gina Garner. I work in our professional preparation unit at the Office of Educator Excellence. And our primary work is with all of our educator preparation programs and institutions, really supporting both teachers who are becoming or who are learning to become a teacher, as well as the programs that prepare them. So for today, we have information for you about the 2 Grow Your Own grants that our office is processing and providing. We also are going to talk about the criteria for each of those different grants, because there's different criteria for each one, and the type of candidates that would be ideal for those particular grants. We'll look at a little bit of a preview of what the application will contain. We'll talk a little bit about partnership building because, as you'll see, these grants do require partnerships. And then what our next steps are and some frequently asked questions. We also know that there will be additional questions. What we have available is the chat. This meeting will be recorded and the recording will be sent out to everyone who registered. We'll also be taking questions in chat as we go along. So something today's meeting will not discuss. We really wanted to kind of frame it around the things we're actually discussing, but there are a lot more funding opportunities. And so our meeting will not discuss some of these other funding opportunities. The 2 at the top, the Educator Fellowship and the My Future Educator Student Teacher Stipend, are all distributed out of the Treasury Department. Those are different pieces. We have PME Explore grants, CTE grants, special education, and military veterans. If you check out this QR code, or if you look when you get your PowerPoint, there should be a link there. And you can further explore the rest of these grants through this link. But today, we're going to focus on our Grow Your Own grants. The applications will be opening soon. We do have kind of a parking lot. We can either use the chat. The YouTube chat is also enabled for this. And then you can also send us a question at MDE-PME@michigan.gov. You can do this at any time. We will also be monitoring those. And then once we're finished with the webinar, we're going to gather all the questions and create a frequently asked questions document. That link will also be sent to every registered participant of the meeting today. And Holly's going to talk a little bit about Future Proud Michigan Educator.
Thanks, everyone. I'm also monitoring the PME inbox. So you may hear my email ringing because there are some folks who are still trying to get in via the YouTube link. So, and I want to make sure they get here as fast as possible. So the Future Proud Michigan Educator Initiative dates back to 2020. We really started the initiative around 6th through 12th grade programs for future educators, looking for ways to reduce barriers and really reach out to try and both increase our future educator workforce and diversify that workforce. And it is expanded every year afterward. The goal of the Future Proud Michigan Educator campaign is to expand access to the programming, whether it's for young people or for career changers or for school staff, and work on reducing those educator shortages while also diversifying the profession. These efforts around Future Proud Michigan Educator include program design, building policy, and facilitating these grants. Here you'll see a graphic that just describes for you the 4 major populations that we have inside of the Future Proud Michigan Educator Initiative. So we have those who work in PE K-12 schools. We have those who want to change careers, those that are certified in other states, and our 6th through 12th grade students. And we've been working to make sure that these are all developed on our Future PME website. But today specifically, we're really going to focus on school staff, and these grants are directed at school staff. So the question here is, what is Grow Your Own? How do we know what makes a Grow Your Own program in the parameters of this grant? And so for this grant specifically, we are helping you to look at this Grow Your Own as a district and building driven effort. This is a chance for you to think about meeting staffing needs, whether they're current needs that you've been trying to meet or currently trying to meet, or predicted staffing needs that you know are coming. We are working to create Grow Your Own preparation partnerships so that all of the candidates who might be seeking teacher certification feel fully supported by both sets of institutions. And then we're also looking to make sure that we include initial teacher certification, but also additional endorsements on an existing teacher certificate. So we can fill those staffing needs with your staff who hold certifications and those who don't. And it really is a target at current employees. We will talk a little bit later about exactly what that means, but I want to make sure that you know right now that it includes anyone who is a substitute teacher paid through a contracted company. That's a really quick FAQ question that we get a lot, is whether or not we can include those even though they're not on the actual payroll of the school or district. So here is the breadth of grant funding that we have gone through in the past few years. As I said earlier, we started with the Explore planning grants. These are for our 6th through 12th grade programs. We then moved forward with some micro grants to bridge between the academic years. And at that time, we were able to add the Grow Your Own staff grants for specific individuals. Some of you may remember applying for those staff grants earlier this year. We were actually overwhelmed with applications and were only able to fund 1/7 of the total applications. And so we were really excited to see that this fiscal year, what you see highlighted in yellow here is an opportunity to reach more staff, including staff who could go through alternative routes and staff who can go through what we're calling Grow Your Own programs. The bulk of our funding is developing programs that can be accessible by staff now and in the future.
So a few basics about these Grow Your Own grants. ISDs, LEAs, and PSAs are eligible applicants the applicants are individual or the K-12 system pieces, such as ISDs and LEAs and PSAs. There is a partnership agreement that will be required with an approved educator preparation program or institution. And so that partnership agreement is something that we're looking for, and that we're going to give you some tips on how to create those partnership agreements. One of the other pieces to think about is that the budgeting will need to be kind of a projected budgeting for the eligible expenses and the application timeline, because we are looking at individuals completing programs, which typically will take more than 1 year. Additionally, candidates cannot concurrently receive either the My Future Educator stipend for student teaching or the My Future Educator fellowship. All Grow Your Own grants are requiring a partnership between a PK-12 entity or system and a Michigan-approved educator preparation provider. Clearly defined partnerships are going to be what really sets off this grant process, because those partnerships will ensure that individuals receiving the grants will be able to complete preparation programs and become certified. So that clearly defined agreement that you create, either with a PK-12 entity or an educator preparation provider, needs to have very clear guidelines and very clear language so that everybody knows what's expected from both. The two grants that we are going to be talking about today are a staff grant or a program grant. The GYO staff grants are really focused on individuals. You have an individual who can meet a certain need in your district. And that's the other piece that we want to emphasize is these grants are really focused on needs. What are the needs that you have that you need to meet with new certified teachers? So these staffing needs that can be met by an individual who has a bachelor's degree or higher, these can really apply towards these GYO staff grants, and these are focused on alternative route programs. Those can either be an initial certification for someone who has no certification, or someone who's just adding an endorsement to an already existing teaching certificate. The degree granting GYO program grants are a little different. You're going to look at the needs you have in the district and kind of predict, there's a group of needs I need. I need to put a cohort of people together to meet these needs. And that's how that grant is designed, so that you're meeting the needs through groups of employees. And those candidates can have any level of education. If they don't have a bachelor's, that's part of this whole grant. And again, it can be either initial or additional certification. Holly is now going to take you through the specifics on each of these grants.
Right, we're going to start with the Grow Your Own staff grants through alternative routes. We wanted to make sure that we were clear about what we mean by alternative routes. So on the screen now, you'll see a list of alternative route providers that can be eligible for this specific grant. So if you have staff members that have bachelor's degrees and you're looking to get them teacher certification or additional endorsements, this is a great opportunity to work with one of these providers in order to do that. Gina, you can move on to the next slide. So let's talk about who the candidates are for this grant. One, they need to be employed in a school, but as I said earlier, that can be part-time, full-time. It can be your paras, your substitute teachers, your before and after care workers, your aides, anyone who's employed and working in the school is someone who we consider eligible for this grant. It has to be someone who already holds a bachelor's degree, enrolled already, or enrolling in an alternative route program. And this can pay for tuition and program fees up to $10,000 per candidate, which we feel strongly should be able to cover the alternative route pathway. Another reminder here that anyone working with this specific grant source cannot be concurrently receiving the My Future Educator Fellowship or stipend. Let's talk about the criteria for these grants. Individual candidates, as Gina mentioned earlier, this is really targeted at someone who you know is going to be able to fill that position, as opposed to having a position and you're going to look for the right candidate to fit it. Our eligible expenses for this grant are tuition, program fees, testing fees, and substitute permits. That's specifically what can be funded here. Nothing outside of that can be funded with this particular grant. The obligation period for this grant started when the governor signed our most recent state budget that had all of this exciting funding in it, and it will end on September 30th of 2023. We do need to liquidate all of those funds by the end of next calendar year, December 30th of 2023. If you'd like to contact alternative route programs or see that list again, or interact with that list and find out which endorsements they offer, you can use this QR code, or you can go to our directory of providers. And under the section that says type, you can choose alternative route providers. And if you click on that provider's name, you'll see all of the different endorsements and programs that they offer. The application for this specific grant will have these sections as you see them here on the screen. First and foremost, everybody's got to be able to identify that local need. What is it that you're looking for, and why is that something that's important to your students in your district? Then we're going to be looking for that provider partnership. In the case of this grant, each individual candidate could be partnered with an institution that they're already attending or that best fits their needs. We're going to ask how you selected the candidates, and we're going to make sure that they meet the criteria for this grant through the application. We're going to ask you to budget around those defined expenses for each candidate and in total. And then there are some assurances that are just going to make sure that you're ready to do the performance reporting and the fund expenditure reporting that are associated with this funding source. Now let's move on and talk about the second grant, the grant that is specific to programs. These programs need to partner with degree granting institutions. That's something that differentiates them from the previous grant that I was discussing. So we're looking here to think about groups of employees, whether it's your existing needs or those projected needs that you might have. And these folks need to be enrolled or enrolling in a preparation program that leads to a degree. They also cannot be concurrently receiving the My Future Educator Fellowship or stipend. The criteria for these grants. We're looking for you to create this sort of sustainable grow your own program model, something that you know that your employees could take advantage of now or next year or in the future, something that says we've got this opportunity that's long lasting and available to multiple employees. And that can be in partnership with an institution that already has a model that you've leveraged and you're really working with, or it could be something that you build together through your partnership. The eligible expenses for this grant are a little bit broader. We have tuition and program fees, books, testing fees, substitute fees, and travel to and from the coursework. In this grant, we also have the opportunity to develop a 6th through 12th grade Explore program with the caveat that it can't exceed more than 10% of your overall budget. Additional criteria that's written into legislation is that the applicants are going to have to project the number of participants, assure that the pathway is no cost to the candidate, pledge to hire the participants in the program, and get the participants to pledge that they will work in the district for as long as they were in the program. The funding source for this grant actually comes from both federal and state funds. And so each of those has a different timeline tied to it, depending on that source. So you've got here a little bit of a different opportunity depending on how far your candidates are in the pipeline. With our federal funds, we can actually backdate all the way to 2021, which is really great if you already have an existing program or pathway, and build all the way out to 2024 with a spend timeline into 2026, as long as those funds are obligated in time. With our state funds, slightly narrower timeline, we again have the date upon which the governor signed our new budget from this year out until 2024, with that liquidation timeline into 2026 as well. Again, if you'd like to contact our traditional prep providers, we didn't provide you a list because it would have exceeded multiple slides. Under type, you can choose education preparation providers, and then you can again click on the name of that provider to see which programs and endorsements they offer. The application for this is very similar to the previous one with a few extra sections. First, establish that need. Help us to understand exactly what it is that your district is trying to do with your program. Second, identify that provider partnership. In the case of this grant, because you're working with multiple groups, possibly, you might want to make sure that you're clear before you even go into the application about who's serving which needs. So for example, you might have one group and it's a group of paras that you'd really like to get certification so that they can work in your local district. That's one group. But you may also have a second group of teachers who are currently working in the district and you want to add an endorsement. Maybe you have a shortage of special educators. And so you're looking for them to get their special education certification, and you might need to partner with a second provider for that purpose. So we're looking for you to identify those provider partnerships and groups of candidates inside of the application. You'll tell us how you have selected or will select the candidates, how many cohorts you'll have, and then you'll also have a section where you can elect to assign up to 10% of your budget to build out a 6th through 12th grade program for Explore. That's also a section that you can skip if it's not relevant to your needs right now. At this point, you'll also have a budget that you'll need to establish. This will just drive off of the previous sections where you've identified your cohorts, and now you'll give us a total that you're looking for. There will also be extra assurances in this application because we are pulling from federal money from the American Rescue Plan. So we are looking for you to assure that all of your spending will align with the specific spending opportunities outlined in that federal language.
So next, we want to talk a little bit about partnerships, because partnerships are required for these grants. And some of you may have partnerships already, and some of you may not. So the first thing we wanted to kind of explore is, what partnerships do you already have with educator preparation providers? And those existing relationships may come in the form of student teaching placements or clinical experiences. Do you host student teachers in your district or ISD or PSA? Do you have clinical experiences happening from one of our approved educator preparation providers in your school or district? Those relationships are already there. That's something that you can reach out and say, hey, what about partnering with us on this grant opportunity? Also, look around and what institutions are nearby. What institutions are perhaps ones that your current teachers are reaching out to or are already enrolled in programs? That's one way to also kind of reach out and try to establish a partnership. Additionally, have you had hiring patterns? Do you have an institution that you've hired multiple teachers from, where you really rely on that institution to send you teachers, or you know that the quality of educators that come from that institution are what you're looking for? That's also an institution that you can possibly reach out and create a partnership with. We do have institutions that have virtual options as well. So if you perhaps are somewhere where there's not a local institution or alternative route available for you, there are options where they have fully virtual programs available that you can tap into. So even if you're in more of a remote area, we've got some institutions that are ready to partner with you and provide that virtual option. Additionally, those alternative route programs, many of our alternative route programs also have virtual or online options, so that distance isn't necessarily a factor when you're trying to identify a program for your candidates. In building a beneficial partnership, what we're looking for is a two-way street. We're looking for a way that partnerships can be what we call mutually beneficial. And if you're thinking, wow, maybe these programs and institutions don't want to partner with us, why would they want to do that? Well, actually, it's really part of their accreditation process. They're always actually looking for partners to work with, to engage with, and to create these mutually beneficial relationships where they give things to you and you are able to provide things for them. And what those things are really depends on your need. So when you're building that partnership, the first thing you need to do, and as you saw with all the grant applications, you've got to do this anyway, define your need. Where are your greatest needs? Do you have groups of needs? Because that will determine, should you go to the individual grant or do you need to go to the program grant? Do you have individuals who are ready to be certified and are really close and just need that extra funding to get past that certification requirement? Do you have grade levels that you feel are not being, you don't have enough faculty for those grade levels, and you're supplying more substitutes for certain grade levels? You can target that. So really determining what is the need that you have, and how can you possibly fulfill that need. The other piece of that is, who do you have? Do you have paraprofessionals who have been working in special education classrooms for a long time, who would be great special educators, but just don't have the funding to continue and get that program? Do you have individuals, paraprofessionals, who don't quite have bachelor's degrees yet? And that's another hurdle they're trying to get over in order to get teacher certification. Do you have teachers who have been subbing in areas where they're really good and they just need that endorsement? Looking at your staff, looking at who you have and how you can help them meet your needs. That's kind of what this process does. And so when you reach out to a provider, you can say, this is what I need. Here's kind of the people I have. And then here's some things that we can offer you. Perhaps you could have your candidates come into our district and work with our students, or observe our masterful teachers and work with our teachers. You can also expect that these partnerships, we don't want these partnerships to just end when these grants end. Our goal is to build sustainable partnerships so that there is this beautiful give and take, but you've got connections to where you've got a pipeline now coming in to meet your staffing needs. These are some of the things that we're really hoping to do. And then full cohorts. This is a great thing. If you've got about 12 people that you need to kind of go through a certain program, you might be able to have a whole program just created for your building or your district that an EPP can provide. So there are a lot of opportunities. Just think about these things as you're approaching either an EPP, or if you're an EPP, if you're a provider and you want to reach out to a K-12 entity and create that partnership. These are areas you want to be ready to help them with. We have a few examples of partnerships that are already happening in Michigan. The Northern Michigan University Preparation Program developed a licensure partnership with East Point schools in the Detroit area. The goal is to support people who hold a bachelor's degree to obtain a teaching certificate in a secondary discipline or in the learning disabilities experimental program, which they also have an experimental program for special education. They're using their NMU Global Campus Graduate Program to meet this need. And the Michigan Department of Education and Office of Special Education are also critical in helping develop any special ed experimental program. So what they're doing, though, is it's a fully online program that offers discounted tuition and an online fee to make sure that there are mentors and partners across the way. So another opportunity that we've seen is Eastern Michigan University creating a partnership with the Washtenaw ISD. And in that partnership, Washtenaw found the funding to fund the certification of paraprofessionals in who either wanted to pursue a learning disabilities or an emotional impairment certification. And they gathered together and created that partnership with Eastern Michigan University that really is meeting those candidates where they're coming from, and making sure that they're able to work full time and complete a degree program with a special education endorsement. And then, Holly, would you be willing to talk a little bit about the Western Michigan University partnership?
Yeah, just briefly, I wanted to mention another population of teachers that could be looking for additional endorsements are those who are looking to become certified in English as a second language. And so we're, or English language learners. And so we're excited to highlight this partnership between West Ottawa and Western Michigan University, where they were able to get a full cohort of teachers to go through and learn more about working with those English language learners in their district. through this Western Michigan University program. And so we saw not only an existing cohort moving through as an opportunity to backdate some of that funding, but also to move forward and think about how many other districts might have very specific endorsements that they're looking to work with and could provide, as Gina said, that full cohort so that the education preparation provider could meet their needs without having to try and synchronize up with an existing program. This is a real opportunity to think about offering classes at night or weekends or in the summer or in times and spaces when they may not have already been offered, because you can offer the EPP that full cohort opportunity.
And some of those also will bring the program to the school or to the district so that that learning can happen right in the district where your candidates are working. Some of the partnership agreement expectations, if you haven't had a partnership agreement before, these are some of the things that we'll be looking for in those partnership agreements as part of the application process. We're really looking for that partnership agreement to really spell out the scope of what coursework will be required and what costs are going to be involved. And that does require a little future projecting on both the PK-12 system that's applying and the provider. You really have to kind of come together on that projection of budget. We're going to look for responsibilities for selecting and mentoring teacher candidates. Who's going to decide who gets this opportunity? And then who's going to mentor these candidates? Because mentoring is critical to any teacher preparation provision. There should be a commitment of the education preparation provider to evaluate that teacher candidate experience and expedite the pathway where possible. So what on the provider's part, how can they expedite that pathway, get them there as quickly as they can with, as in a budgeted way. And then, how are you evaluating that teacher candidate? What are the ways that you're going to make sure you've evaluated that they're meeting the standards and that they'll be ready for certification eventually? You're also going to have to spell out who's responsible for coaching, who's responsible for observation, what kind of assessments are going to be used in that observation and assessment, and what are those requirements for program completion. Who is responsible for MTTC support? That's our teacher certification test in Michigan. Who's going to help teachers study for those tests and prepare to be successful in that certification test? And then, once you get a teacher candidate certified, are there going to be needs there? Who's going to mentor that teacher candidate through those first couple of years of teaching when things do come up and you realize, oh, there's something I didn't quite practice in my teacher prep program. I need some help. Somebody can kind of talk me through this. So who's going to support those candidates once they are working teachers? One of the things that we think will be very helpful, and we're in the process of doing this, we don't have this link yet, but we will send it out to registered participants of this webinar, is we're doing a survey right now of all of our EPP partners. And we're asking them, do you have expedited programs? Do you have programs that allow someone to come in and kind of do a fast track to a teaching certificate? Do you have online programs, fully online programs? Do you have residency programs where someone can work full-time as a teacher and still complete a program? Are you open to building new pathways? Are there other things that you're interested in building, like an online program, but you just haven't gotten to it yet? So we're going to get this survey and hopefully be able to get it out sometime in the next few weeks so that if you're not sure who you want to partner with, here's a way to figure out, okay, who has an online program that I can reach out to and say, I really want to get this group of paraprofessionals into that online program. So we're going to be here along the way to really help you build those next steps. And speaking of which, here's our next steps.
So if you are a preparation provider, we are thinking that this might be the list of things you might want to do next. First and foremost is obviously reach out to your existing K-12 partners or partnerships you're looking to pursue and build out program plans for them. They really can't do this without you. They need to know what is the scope of coursework, when are the courses offered, when can you start, when might you finish. And so along with that, we need you to help them to estimate the costs inside of that eligible window. With that in mind, those are the first few requirements of the partnership agreement. And so if you could identify somebody in your staff or your faculty that would be willing to be in charge of those partnership agreements, then you might have someone on the K-12 side who can partner up with that person and really move that work forward without the institutional kind of lag that can sometimes happen. Your partners might also need help with grant writing. In some districts, there's an official grant writer or somebody who traditionally takes on that role. In other places, they could really use your help and your expertise with writing the grant and perhaps even just reviewing what they have written so that there's an extra set of eyes on it. And then we also want you to take a look at the partnership matchmaking sessions that we're going to hold. Gina and I are looking for dates on our calendars to open breakout rooms in a virtual meeting like this, where K-12 districts that are interested in applying for the grant could meet with preparation providers that could potentially meet their needs. If you are a school or district or PSA and you're looking to be an applicant for this grant, we want you to think about your needs first and foremost. We would encourage you to survey your staff to determine their interest and their education level so that you can sort of properly sort your eligible applicants into the 2 different grant opportunities. We want you to estimate the number of participants, connect with an EPP partner or more than one partner to build out those partnership agreements and budgets. And then what's really important for this grant, because you will be the applicant, is that it's going to be hosted inside of a system called GEMS Mars. Some of you might already be familiar. And currently GEMS Mars is accessed through My Login. What I learned recently is that there are 3 different types of My Logins. And so you have to make sure that you have a My Login for third party, and that will be the place where you'll eventually be able to open up the application. If you log in either of the other spaces, you won't see the application in front of you. We are thinking an early December release. We're targeting December 9th as our opening date for this application. And also you can look for those partnership matchmaking sessions too. We're going to send an email out to anybody who registered for this webinar in an effort to provide you with an opportunity to contact directly those EPPs and talk to more than one in one space and time. Quick note about the application process for those of you who will be applicants. We are going to try our best to keep the Grow Your Own Grant website up to date with all information possible. That includes an upcoming frequently asked questions section that we're building out right now based on what you're putting in the chat and what we've already heard from some of our stakeholders. Think about who on your staff is going to have that My Login access, and they can actually log in now and request access to the GEMS Mars system so that you're ready to go as soon as the application is released. Once it's released, we encourage you to review the application in full and then draft your responses outside of the application. 1, so that you can always have a record of it. 2, so that you can share it inside of your institution and get feedback before you actually go in and place your final answers and responses inside of the application and submit it there.
And also you'll be making sure your partner has a chance to give feedback to that as well. So
Yes.
that's another reason to have that external piece. So we've come to frequently asked questions. We have the contact us there at MDE-PME@michigan.gov. That is one place that you can submit questions. We have a few that we're going to kind of go through first, and then we'll look into the chat and see what additional questions we have in our chats. So let's start. Holly, you want to start in on some questions, and I'll kind of look at our chats.
I have been attempting to chat some individuals who had very specific questions with the time and space that I've had, but I haven't been able to get to everything. I do think you'll see some of your answers here though, and then we'll circle back to anything that's still unanswered. First, most important question, when will the grant be available? Again, we're targeting December 9th as our opening date. And regardless of when we open, we will always keep the application open for 8 full weeks. And that will allow you, in the time you have before the application opens, to build up whatever you need to prepare, but it will also allow you some time while the application is open to finish off some of those partnership agreements or staff surveys if necessary. Who qualifies as support staff? As I said earlier, some of you weren't able to be here, but I want you to hear it again. Anybody who is working in your schools, whether full or part-time, qualifies as support staff. And so that can be your substitute teachers, even if they're paid by a third-party sub company. That can be your paraprofessionals, your existing teachers, your before and after care workers, your food workers, your bus drivers. I'm trying to think if there's any other major group of folks that really, your office staff, your central office staff, anybody who works within your system is eligible for this grant. Which endorsements and certifications qualify for funding? So this grant can be used to add additional endorsements as long as you've demonstrated that need for the endorsements. And we are looking for any endorsements that can be added to an existing teaching certificate. Some of you have asked whether or not this qualifies for administrator certification. And the answer right now is no. That is not an additional endorsement that you add upon a teaching certificate. It is its own certificate. So that would not qualify for this round of funding. Where can you learn which EPPs offer the certifications and endorsements necessary to fill the staffing needs? I would encourage you to go back to that directory of preparation providers. You should see the QR code and the link to it in the PDF that we sent you before the meeting started. And you can sort and filter based on the endorsement that you need, based on the grant that you're looking for, whatever it may be. At this moment, I also want to answer a question that I don't think we've fully clarified up until now. You are eligible as an applicant to apply for both of these grants. You do not have to identify one or the other that's going to meet your needs. We're offering both grants, one for alternative routes and one for degree granting programs, but it's possible that you have staff that qualify in both spaces. So don't limit yourself to thinking about one funding source completely. Leverage both possible applications. We're going to combine the two applications into one link inside of GEMS Mars. So we refer to it as one application, but it really has both programs, both grant opportunities inside of that one application. Can candidates access more than one grant? Yes, with the caveat that there are some limitations on the My Future Educator Fellowship and Stipend. So Gina did a great job the other day of drawing my attention to the fact that there are some candidates who are enrolled in alternative route programs in order to seek their initial certification, but who are also in degree granting programs to add that special education endorsement at the same time. That person could access both funds. Can a candidate get a Grow Your Own Staff grant to finish courses in the fall and then apply for the My Future Educator Fellowship or Stipend? Yes. The key word here is concurrently. So they can't receive these funding sources concurrently, but they can receive them separately in separate semesters. So you could build your applications such that you are funding multiple candidates up until they are eligible for a fellowship or stipend, and then you're looking towards that funding source as an additional opportunity. How can you build a budget if you don't know what tuition will cost in 2 years? Well, what we've heard from our education preparation providers is that there's typically a percent increase that they could potentially rely on as an estimate. And that's what we're looking for, is really the best estimate. We know that there could be dramatic changes in the future, but we can't anticipate those right now. So we're looking for you to build your best possible budget. And we're also looking for you to think about other funding sources. We're in the process right now of building out an interactive form that would allow candidates to be able to identify which possible funding sources they qualify for. So we have the Grow Your Own grants, we have the My Future Educator Fellowship and Stipend, we have the Michigan Reconnect program, we have the recent opportunity that Governor Whitmer put forward for any of our need qualifying students to get funding for community colleges or any form of higher education. So we're really looking at a breadth of funding sources here that we could stack and create opportunities. Can non-public schools apply? At this time, no, non-public schools cannot apply. However, there are some shared time positions or other circumstances where public schools or ISDs work in partnership with private schools. And so a public school, a public entity, can apply on behalf of, in shared agreement with, the private institution, but the public school becomes the fiscal agent in that case. Do candidates have to complete a degree if they get the program grant for degree granting programs? There's nothing written in legislation that says they have to get to degree. In fact, some of these programs are a degree granting program, but they allow certification before the completion of the degree. So there is a possibility that a candidate would reach certification and not actually complete the degree. But the way the language is written right now, it does have to be a degree granting program. What's a no-cost pathway and how do we budget for that? So we would encourage you to think really deeply with the Grow Your Own program grants about what costs a candidate might incur, because there is a list of approved expenditures and there's also some language in there that says we're not limited to that list of expenditures. So if you're aware of something that's really going to be important for your candidates, then build it into your budget. We have a competitive review process here at MDE for these grants. And so what will happen is that your applications will go through 3 different reviewers, and those reviewers will look at your budgets and then make a recommendation for full or partial funding. What happens if an employee leaves the district or doesn't continue the program? At this time, there's nothing legislatively that dictates what might happen in that case. So we would encourage you as individual entities to think about whether or not you want to create policies around that. We know that the legislation asks for a pledge from the candidate to be in the district as long as they were in the program, and a pledge from the applicant district PSA to hire that person. But at this point, you might want to think about, as an applicant, whether or not you want to put some additional policies or boundaries in place around what could happen in the future that you want to be specific about in your area. Those are our planned frequently asked questions. Gina, if you go one more slide,
Okay.
I think we've got our contact information.
Yep. Do we want to hit a couple of the questions in the chat first?
I do want to look at the chat, but I also wanted to
leave
have
that up.
contact up.
Yep.
So if anybody wanted to send emails and they couldn't chat, that they can.
Yep. Absolutely. Yes. So there's a few, while we're kind of starting to go through some of these questions in the chat. There is the PME, MDE PME at michigan.gov. If you're following us on YouTube and would like to send in additional questions, please send those in via email. There are some questions. The funding opportunities for social work staff. Did we decide that was?
Social work is not an endorsement that you can add.
Right, it's its own
teaching certificate. So a counseling endorsement is possible, but a social work degree would not qualify for the grant because it doesn't lead to an endorsement.
It needs to be something that will go on a teaching certificate and as a teaching endorsement. There's an interesting question about alternative routes. Some have said, well, there's an alternative route program that's not on that list. Actually, that list is the definitive list of alternative route programs. But some of our institutions have residential programs, experimental programs, and other programs that are kind of alternative ways, but it is not an alternative route. Alternative route is a completely different classification. And so that defined list that you saw with the QR code earlier, those are the alternative routes that are available for that grant. Everything else is considered a degree granting program and would be a part of the program grants. So when you go to that list, there's a very specific, you can click for alternative routes and you get the alternative routes, and then you can get the degree granting. A couple of our institutions are both alternative routes and traditional programs. You can engage with them as 2 separate partners in that way if they have both of them. But again, that list is definitive, so it has to be there. There was also somebody else who had asked about whether you can partner with an out-of-state institution. Nope, you have to partner with a Michigan-approved educator preparation provider, either one of our traditional routes or alternative routes. Let's see. Is there a limit to how many staff members they can submit for the grant and then what everybody receive. So I guess that's a good question, Holly. If they submit as a group, like a program group, is there a limit to the number? And if they submit it as a group, would it be something where everyone in the group received the grant?
At this time, there is no limit. We're just looking to look at the budgets and then decide, within the available funding, who we can fund. To specify, in addition to this question, there are some questions about candidates who are already en route. Yes, absolutely. If you have an existing program or candidates who are en route, they can qualify for the funding, and you can project needs in order to fill positions in the future, and have some idea about where it is that you want to fill those needs without candidates already identified. So both sets of staff are eligible.
And notice those dates that we have when you receive your PowerPoint. Those dates of when you can apply for funding are critical in terms of what would qualify, what expenditures would qualify for this. There was a question about what about the candidates that applied last year and were not funded but meet the criteria. And you can absolutely reapply for those candidates and include those candidates in on this next round. There's no disqualification if you had tried before and didn't get another grant. That's absolutely not. We're taking everything on the merits of the proposals that come into us with these applications.
And as a comment about that last round of funding, given the delay in the funds being available on that last round of funding, we had a very narrow window upon which folks could spend money. And so with 7 times as many applicants as we could fund, we did give preference to anyone who was more than 50% of their way through the program, because we knew then that the funding would fall into the eligible window. With this grant, there is no preference to the completion date on the program or how far in the program you are or which endorsements you are seeking. So this is a wide open opportunity.
There are questions, Holly, about, what if there are schools that have a few different people going through a few different programs? And the question about how many partnerships can one school or K-12 entity sustain? And I think that's a fair enough question.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, there has been a teacher shortage and there have been staffing needs. And so many districts have already initiated this work to get teachers certified, and some of them have funded it. So by all means, I can understand why you might have multiple institutions that you're working with. The Grow Your Own program grants were really designed around the idea of establishing programs. And those programs typically need more than one participant, or are designed to have multiple participants over time. And so the idea about the partnership agreement in those comes specifically from initiating something new or reinforcing something existing that allows multiple people to take advantage of the opportunity. I think if you've got 50 employees that are going to 50 different institutions, it certainly would be a challenge for you to create partnership agreements for all 50 of those in order to access the funds. But we also would have to circle back to how each of those 50 people is meeting a specific need inside of the district. And so if you're in a situation like that, by all means, feel free to reach out to me, send me an email, and maybe we can set up a meeting where we could talk through what's the best way to approach your specific situation. I'm more than happy to do individual consultations with anyone who wants a little bit more guidance.
And I do think there's some pieces in here that that may apply to. We've got some people describing very specific situations in the questions that really might lend themselves better to reaching out to the MDE PME email and just setting up a quick appointment to kind of talk through, this is our situation, this is what we're trying to figure out, and let Holly kind of help you brainstorm through what would be the best way to approach that. I do believe there is an interesting question about whether these grants can be used to cover someone's tuition to complete an undergrad degree so that they can start a master's degree, and the master's degree is what leads to the cert. And I
saw that.
Go ahead, Holly. I'll let you.
That the simplest answer is that these funds have to go to an educator preparation provider. And so if that situation, and I believe the situation specified here does qualify, that those courses would be offered inside of an education preparation provider institution, then absolutely, I feel like writing it as such, as a program that leads to that degree, what you're saying is that that program needs to also include some of those undergraduate level courses in order to get folks to certification. So I would see that as an eligible expense. On the contrary, I'm hearing from people, well, we have some folks that we need to send to our local community college before we send them to the educator preparation provider. And the limit written into legislation on this funding is that the funding has to go to the educator preparation provider. So while the funding cannot go directly to the community college, if there was a program developed in order to do dual admission at both the community college and the ed prep provider, and that the provider could take the funds from the grant, then you've established the opportunity to leverage the funds and meet the needs of needing some of those community college courses.
Excellent. Also, there's a question that says they see the staff grant is $10,000 per candidate. Is there a limit for the program grant per candidate?
There is no limit for the program grant. It is supposed to be a no-cost pathway. So writing in all possible expenses is encouraged for the program grant. The limit per candidate on the alternative route grant is a reflection of two things. One, what we know the average cost to be for alternative routes, and then two, the limit in spending timeline for that grant is much smaller, as the programs are also smaller. The funding source is also smaller. So we felt like that $10,000 limit would allow us to leverage as many candidates as possible with our funding.
There's specific questions about counselors, school counselors, that really, if you're asking about, whether someone can enter a school counselor program without an educator bachelor's degree or something like that, those are good questions for those school counselor programs, because each program has its own kind of entrance requirements and things they're willing to help people work towards. So maybe if a candidate doesn't quite have the right entrance requirements, they could help them get there. So those are very specific. But like Holly said, the funding really applies towards getting people certified. So what is it that that person would need to achieve that certification? And that can be written into the grant as long as it's a teacher certification. Are direct program costs to administer the grant or indirect costs allowable to include in the budget?
Great question. For the Grow Your Own Program grant, given the fact that we have a federal funding source, we are allowing for indirect costs for program administration. For the alternative route grants, the individual grants, there isn't a line in the budget for indirect costs. So yes to one and no to the other.
You think we do a couple of more of these, or?
Yeah, I see a good one about, can the educator preparation provider have access to the application plan? And that's a great question, because I did specify that you would need a My Login. Any EPP staff or faculty member can create a My Login. However, as a workaround, I'm also developing an application template that I can send out as a Word document. And so I'm looking to follow up with the opportunity to attach that to an email as well, so that you could have a space to draft and plan and share out with some of your partners before you actually had to get into the application. I'm trying to remove that hurdle if possible.
Excellent. There's a question about, are standalone charter districts eligible to apply? Absolutely. If you're a public service academy, absolutely you are eligible to apply. Any public PK-12 entity is able to apply. There was another question about whether an ISD can apply and manage it for districts. Yep, that's available as well. So yeah, all kinds of configurations. Go ahead.
Really quickly. I get this question about, can an ISD apply on behalf of all districts, or do the districts have to apply individually? Both are an option, one or the other. The question is, who is going to be the fiscal agent? Does the ISD want to manage and report out on the money and the performance of the grant, or do the individual districts want to do that? I have had in the past successful opportunities for an ISD to collaborate with all of those local districts to establish essentially an almost identical application, but each of the districts wanted to manage their own funds. And so they submitted applications that were nearly identical because it was a countywide or ISD-wide effort. So really you can go either direction. It's a question of who is going to manage the funding. Let's do maybe
Can
more.
this is a good one. Can someone have a teach grant and these program grants at the same time? I think that would depend on the teach grant, but these can be together, right? These can, you just can't have the my future educator grants at the same time.
I don't know the parameters around the teach grant.
Yeah.
I know that our grant was not written to exclude teach grant, but I don't know if the reverse is true.
Yep. So you would have to check with the teach grant people and see if that was a possibility or if they can only hold that one grant at a time. And does eligible expenditures for the program grant include childcare costs for participants?
Childcare costs would fall into the language that says expenses can include but are not limited to. So there's nothing barring you from writing that into your grant proposal. I don't know, given the review process, whether or not which expenses might be eliminated or approved. There's no way to predict that, but there's nothing that says you can't write that expense in as something that you want to add into the language that says you can not limit your expenses to what's listed in legislation.
There is something about, can we have more documentation for prospective teachers to learn about this? We do have the grant, Grow Your Own Grant page, but please remember that the applicants are the schools, ISD, the district, those are the applicants. So the teachers are not going to be doing this on their own. This is coming through the school to the teachers. So we can educate them, but the people who are going to need to know the most are going to be staff members at the school. We will be able to, we're sending out, those of you who may not have gotten it before, there was an email that was sent out for all registered participants. There should be a PDF of the slideshow in that email as well. We do understand that setting up the partnerships, there's going to be work involved. And we know that these are tight timelines. We are working with our providers, also having webinars with them. Some of them are online today with us. Welcome, everyone. But one thing we're reaching out to our providers is how can you help our PK-12 partners create this grant process, get this grant application underway, make it easier for these partnerships to be formed. Because we do recognize that there's a little bit of front-end work that has to happen with these applications. So we're really trying to message with all of our providers, what are the easiest ways that you can work with the partners and get these partnerships set up. And really, I think the partnership agreements are going to be really the critical piece of that. We're keeping the application as simple as we possibly can. We're having, like you saw on the slide, there's places for you to describe things and provide narratives, but we're trying not to make it a super extensive application because we know really that extensive work should go into those partnership agreements so that those are solid partnership agreements and you know what's expected from both sides as this funding comes out.
And I would also echo Gina in that the partnership agreement is a fundamental part of making sure the candidate gets support from both institutions and doesn't have to navigate all the systems on their own. I will say that the partnership agreement language is also very broad. There's nothing that says that either institution has to take on all responsibilities. It's just clarifying whose responsibilities there are inside of this agreement and on behalf of this candidate. So while the list that goes into the partnership agreement can look a little daunting at first, I think when you actually begin to draft out language, you'll find that it's pretty easily replicable across multiple agreements. I'll also say there was a great question in the chat about, do we give the funds to the staff member or do we give the funds to the institution? That again is at your discretion. I think sometimes the simplest line is to give the funds directly to the institution. It's easier to track, and then you don't have to collect, invoices and reimburse. Some of these funds have already been paid, however, so there will need to be a reimbursement if that's the grant that you're approved for. And then I'll also say that there have been some questions about whether or not there are tax implications for candidates who are reimbursed with these funds. And that's an outstanding question for me. I'm not entirely certain I understand the implications of that. So if push comes to shove, I might encourage you to be able to direct funding directly to the institution to avoid any of those questions.
That's a great idea. It's also a great question here. Can an LEA partner with another LEA to create a cohort in a specific area like special education? That sounds great. I love that idea.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Especially in our small rural districts.
Yep.
Coming together with a group might be something that seems like a daunting task. Many of your individual districts are facing the same challenges. And so there's no limitation on partnering together to meet those needs because you share similar needs.
There is someone asking about CTE. And does this qualify for CTE? It does not. We do have a separate grant process for CTE that if you follow that grants page, you can check that out. What this does qualify for is any teaching endorsement. So when you go to our programs page that you had a link for before, and you click on a provider and they have the list of programs that are available, there's a center column that will say whether it's teaching, CTE, or administrative. The ones that are teaching endorsements are the ones that are available and eligible for these 2 GYO grants. But there are other grant opportunities for CTE. And we do hear everybody about the administrator funding as well. And we will take that back to our leadership and let them know that there's also a need for administrator funding. Unfortunately, these are focused on teacher certification.
Okay, I think at this point, I have an email inbox full of questions. And so I'm going to work on making sure that we respond to those questions. I'm also going to make sure that we do a couple of things. One is to get the frequently asked questions answered up on our website as soon as possible. And the other is that we are going to follow up with an email that has a link to the grant website specifically in case you haven't navigated there already, a link to a recording of today's session, another PDF of the slide deck if it's for some reason folks weren't able to get it the first time around. And then we're also going to include in our follow-up email the dates, times, and links for our matchmaking sessions that we talked about that would allow you, the providers and the K-12 folks to come together and start to talk about how to meet their needs. But in the meantime, before that comes out, I will continue to monitor the PME inbox and continue to try and respond to all of your individual thoughts and concerns and schedule some follow-up times with you to conference. Please don't hesitate to ask for time, because if we get everybody in one space together, I think we can be really efficient about meeting those needs and getting ready for the application to be released.
So thank you so much for attending today. We really appreciate you. Please reach out with questions. We will take all of the questions in the chat today and add those into our frequently asked questions page so that we really try to cover a lot of what's out there. But still, don't hesitate to reach out to our PME website. Please, if you get a chance, give us some feedback on this presentation, and we'll be in touch. Look for those matchmaking emails, and we hope you have a wonderful day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.